Hello, it's Neal Romanek from AU, and welcome to another Feed Forum. And what's the most important thing in sports? Well, it's not the game, it's not the players, it's the fans. The fans are the most important thing in sports. Without fans, well, you may have an interesting game going off on a pitch somewhere, but really, who cares? Unless there are actually fans to watch it, the games don't matter as much. It's the fans, and broadcasters, clubs, leagues are trying to retain fans now in new and better ways and scrambling for fan eyeballs. And we are lucky to have some great guests with us today to talk about fan engagement and how we can attract fans, keep them loyal, and deliver them with best possible sports content we can. We have with us today Ed Abis, who's the CEO of Dizplai, Ursula Romero, is the CEO of International Sports Broadcasting. We've got John Hobbs from AE Live, Alex Redfern, who is the CTO at EVS, Joe Redfern, no relation, founder and CEO of Futurehood. And guys, great to have you here. And I guess I'll throw it out. The first question to you is, fandom is changing. I mean, we know that like viewing patterns are changing, and we live in this kind of digitally saturated world now, where screens are ubiquitous. So I can watch just about anything I want, anytime, and that changes the fan experiences, and the fans themselves are changing. Just wondering, what is your take on how fandom is changing and how it's evolved, especially over the last few years when we have so many digital platforms available? Ursula, do you want to jump in that first?
That is a very good question. And it's interesting that you asked me that because I've been thinking about this for the last 2 weeks very intensively, since we decided last summer to create an exclusive dedicated OTT platform and app for the World Games, for the IWGA, the International World Games Association. And we did that just before the games last year in China. And of course, there were several issues there that we had to, overcome. One of them being in China and not, being able to share the rights with the local rights holder with CMG. But now since we're also the rights agent for the IWGA, and the next upcoming World Games will be in Germany in 29, we are now really starting to have endless discussion on what we should do with this platform. On one side, they know that they need to have a platform because everybody else has a platform, but then they're also dealing with the issue right sales versus platform. The right sales for events that are not necessarily, Olympics or World Cups or, lower tier events are not great. Hence, therefore, to go the platform route. So now we're looking at ways on how we can enhance the platform in the next few months, years leading up to the game so that we can get fans directly involved. Fans can engage directly with the athletes and the federations, and the platform is set up for that. And that was the whole idea from the beginning, that it would be like a 360 ecosystem of distribution to B2B, distribution B2C, and also getting fans involved in athletes also sharing their footage. So that's kind of the big discussion that we're having now. And I'm wondering and questioning with the IWGA whether we should just cut out the rights altogether and just have everything be on the platform. Therefore, it becomes the only place for people to be able to watch the games live and also watch and engage with the athletes. So yeah, it's a very big question. And for me, I don't have a TV at home. I am very sometimes ashamed to say, but I don't watch TV. Only when I have to. But I think it's very clear that fans are more and more engaging through devices, whether we want to hear it or not. And our company lives off of broadcasting, so it's kind of.
Mm.
But we're finding ourselves more and more now when we produce bids for various events that we're really focusing on the social media aspects and creating vertical content that, and really pushing more for that rather than really going for the big, broadcast for linear or for a TV. So I think it's kind of really on the cusp right now where, you know, and organizations like the World Games are really struggling with that decision because you have their board of directors and the different federations that are saying, yeah, but we need to sell the rights and we need to have the national broadcasters because, but then it's like, yeah, but are people really watching that? And the demographics of people that are watching sport on TV are getting lower and lower. In Germany, for example, except for football, if you look at numbers of who actually sits down to watch sport on TV, it's becoming more like 50 and above. So what's going to happen in 2029, so yeah, very interesting question.
Amazing. Who else wants to jump in on that?
If I may jump in, Neal, because what you said, Ursula, is very interesting because my specialism, I spent most of my career in kids media. So that means I've been following their behaviors, and they were the first ones to embrace digital distribution. I mean, the kids media industry was the first to go through this because kids are normally the ones that are leading the charge with these change in media consumption behaviors. To that end, now that I take my knowledge of 15 years in kids media and I'm now applying it in sport, the notion of sports fandom and viewership, as Ursula has said, has completely changed. What used to be where the value lie, which was the live product, is no longer, for those younger demographics who go to social platforms first, the value is no longer mainly in the live. They want to watch the World Cup final or the Champions League final or big cultural moments where actually experiencing it together is important. But week in, week out, 3 hours of watching live sport when they've got all of this other content that's vying for their attention. No, we now found there was an advertising body that's aligned with Columbia University in the States just released some research where they polled young people about the value that they place in media. And they were saying in sports now, a 15-minute highlights package is as valuable to them as the live. So to Ursula's points, that calls into question the whole distribution strategy and the commercial model of sports media. It's kind of turned everything upside down. So that it's really interesting what you said, Ursula, about the big strategic questions that you're grappling with, because I come at it very much from the audience behavior and media consumption side, and it completely aligns with what you're saying. Really, when you think about it, is exclusivity bad now? Is exclusivity not where the value lies? Because if exclusivity equals anonymity, that's bad. So do you need to now think about going everywhere? Well, going everywhere is quite tricky when you have to do deals with people. So do you just not do deals and put it everywhere or all in one place? It's fascinating.
And it's like a perfect kind of financial value conundrum, isn't it? Like if you own everything yourself and you're in control of everything yourself, then seemingly great. But obviously you've got this legacy amount of money that you were expecting. And actually there's a lot of pressure to try and take that all on yourself and go, no, we believe in the way we can do it. And also we can support the way we can support that for years and years and years potentially, and stay up to date and stay with a relevant tech stack and partner with the right organizations all ourselves, take all that responsibility on ourselves as a rights holder, or we carry on the way we've done it before because we know it and it feels safer. And there's a certain level of rights holder where one is the better option and another level of rights holder where the other is the better option. And then there's a lot in the middle.
It depends a bit about your power as a rights owner as well, because as a rights owner, there's the potential for more diversification of your rights. We've seen people selling rights for Immersive, for example, that just didn't exist before because there was no immersive output or distribution channel. But then that's for like top tier leagues, like really premium leagues. When you get down to sort of the tier 2, tier 3 sports, the number one distribution channel has to be YouTube. It has to be bite size. It has to be, those live events still happen, but there's been plenty of things that I'm not going to watch, but they appear in my feed. And the power of the algorithm becomes more and more important to the lower tier sports to promote their sports and bring them to the fan. And I'm seeing things in my feed that I would never watch. And I love watching. It's like, this is amazing. I've never have seen this 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, perhaps.
Yeah, look, the way I mean, there's a few things that I thought about this. Like, look, Gen Z, there's all this talk about short attention spans. They just don't tolerate, I'm trying to think of the most eloquent way to say it, is crap content. Like, the content needs to be for them. They feel like they want to be part of the storytelling. They want to somehow shape the editorial narrative of the content that they're consuming. They feel like they want to be part of that experience. And so it's not necessarily about a shift in demographic. They've got so used to, I guess, watching creators who've earned the trust of them in terms of how they make content because they couldn't watch content anywhere else for a multitude of reasons or didn't want to, that now they generally flock towards those type of people. And more often than not, we see that, I mean, Joe touched on live content there, that, there is still a lot of consumption of live content, but it's not necessarily about the match or the game or the event itself. It's content that other people are making in and around it. And it's not like the one's better than the other. They're equally as valuable. And it's an opportunity for these rights holders to lean into that and perhaps work with these different creators that popped up and created those niches. And I think to your point, Alex, like you start to find lots of micro influencers that can still allow you to get to the audience you want to get to. And it's going even deeper out than YouTube. It's kind of like, okay, I'm going to go on YouTube. I'm going to go with her and him and them and distribute it like that.
The guy Mark, what's his name, who bought the Bundesliga rights, Goldbridge bought the rights in the UK. That for me was a really interesting, fascinating transition of this is a YouTuber buying the rights. And even talking to people, it's like YouTube bought the rights. No. A YouTuber bought them. And then you're right, you get into the micro segmentation. But again, the Bundesliga probably wouldn't have sold those rights into the UK if it wasn't for the broadcaster and if it wasn't for the rights owner. And it's that diversification potential is there and it's really fascinating.
Same happened with a rugby creator, Tim Cocker, who had the YouTube Egg Shakers YouTube channel, picked up French Division 2 rugby, right? Yeah, and so now we've got creators becoming streamers. But yeah, I mean, it basically means that we've gone from 20 odd years where your distribution partner list you could probably count on the fingers of one hand to now they're potentially into the hundreds. If you roll in creators and all the different platforms and the different types of content, like you said, Alex, there are rights categories now emerging that didn't exist 5 years ago. And new categories emerging since last time you actually renewed with someone. But actually, it would be very easy to renew on the same terms with your broadcast partner because the commercial director might not necessarily be aware that there's a new sliver of rights that might be best leveraged over here to reach some future. I mean, it's quite a crazy shift that we're going through, I think, for sports media.
Just to add to that as well, like Alex, obviously, yes, you're working with obviously NBC right during the Winter Olympics, and they announced a little while ago that they've created this creator collective that's not necessarily going to be taking the linear feed, right? Because whenever I talk about how there's a different mode of distribution now, it's not like I'm saying, oh, broadcasting bad, media companies bad. Like, no, it's just, I always think about more from a marketeer, the right product, right place at the right time, that the audience is just incredibly fragmented. And if you understand how to distribute, there's lots of opportunity there. It's just different from how it was before, that it's not, in the UK, like we used to have 4 channels and it was pretty easy. Now it's infinite. And it's just finding the right ones that reach the right demographic and also psychographic of what you're trying to reach.
And actually, if I was going to give, Neal, I was very quickly, if I was going to give a one-word answer to your original question, it would be differentiation or expectation of differentiation. Like that's, I think, one of the key kind of things that we're looking at now in terms of how to engage the fans, know who they are, understand how they want to consume it, and make sure that content is differentiated to how they want it to be.
That's certainly something that I see in my work with the younger demographic, because Gen A, for example, who are coming up to 16, imminently monetizable, they're important to sports media. They are the most media literate generation ever. They've never known a time without almost infinite content. They've never known a time without content on demand. And so there's I almost see a competency gap actually in sports media, in the sense that you've got to then create content for certain need states. You know, a 15-second clip, which is just a highlight of a goal last night or something funny that happened in a game, is a certain need state while you're walking to school with your friends and you're just chattering about what happened. It's different to when you actually sit down in front of the TV and you're setting yourself up for a big game or 2 hours of lean back content. And so it's no longer, particularly with that younger cohort, you can't just stick clips up and just copy paste them everywhere and think that that's your social media strategy done. It's much more sophisticated than that, to your point, John. It has to be differentiated, but it has to be designed to satisfy the need states of your audience when they're on that platform. So we move from a fairly pretty established playbook in the last couple of decades to now, having this ecosystem that we have to service that now demands different ways of capturing content, distributing it. And that's before we even start thinking about how on earth do we value this thing and monetize it. So that's certainly what I spend a lot of time trying to unpick.
Just to give an example, Alex, to the one you mentioned there with Mark Goldridge as well, because we've been involved in that as well, and we've worked with Mark for 4 or 5 years now. Even his own feed, when he does the Friday Night Live with Bundesliga, he has 2 versions of that. One, which is UK geo-blocked, where he can show the game, he's picture-in-picture, he's talking through the game. And another one for his international audience, because he has his own audience that he needs to continue to service, which is without the Bundesliga rights, where he's doing his full watch-along, and he's watching the game like he would do with any normal game where he doesn't have the rights. So even he, within his own ecosystem, has differentiated between the audiences.
So there's that, beyond the rights, there is the different types of content that need to be created. So it seems like that's one of the big challenges as well, is not just to getting the match or getting the event in front of people. That's one thing. But that you're really having to create all kinds of new content, new formats, before the match, after the match, during the match.
And it has to be done right. Actually, not just putting up some videos. I mean, sorry to jump in, but because that's something that we did it very intensely. We got a gentleman who's a very, very good editor, and he's kind of created a niche for himself to do these vertical videos, and they were amazing. Like, they were really, really good. And I was trying to figure out how he was doing that, but he was just extremely talented in finding those pieces that he thought people would find interesting. And we had a few pieces that went randomly completely viral within a day. And you look at it and you go, what's so special about that? But then, there was somebody that picked it up and was commenting on it. And then the next thing you know, it was like, and we now hired him again for something that we're doing for the Wushu Federation, because they all want to do vertical videos. And it's funny because the videos that he's produced, we sent them back to the Federation, and of course they had comments on it. But one of the things that they wanted to do is put these horrible graphics on them that is like yellow and pink and, like kind of a whoosh, swoosh, kind of a punchy, cartoony like thing. And we were looking at it going, what is so nice about that? It doesn't match, the beautiful moves of the sport. But apparently that's what works, So it's you have to also find that you have to know how to produce these pieces. It's not just, do a quick video and that's it. You have to actually curate it and know what you're doing, which is it's fascinating because it creates a whole new, highlights, montages, quick pieces, feeds, and it's like a whole Pandora's box of new things. So
there's a new visual language, isn't there? There is a new visual language, and it's not easy to understand if you're our generation. I did a little bit of work with the Premier League last year on their YouTube strategy, and to that point, the Premier League's YouTube strategy was take some clips, some highlights from Sky Sports, and put it on the Premier League YouTube channel. And we ran a pilot for content that was aimed at teenagers. That was the first time they'd actually commissioned and created some content to sit on the Premier League channel. And of course, it did have a very YouTube native visual language. And interestingly, following the comments, as I did afterward, I wanted to see the response. They fell into two camps, unsurprisingly. There were the people who were used to the traditional Premier League content that were like, what the hell is this brain rot? This rubbish slop. But of course, then you started getting some younger commenters saying, oh, kudos, finally the social team's been allowed to create. And it was really interesting seeing those two strands emerge. And it was heartening in a way, because although nobody really wants to see someone criticizing, in a way that kind of validated what we'd done, because there were another load of comments that were saying, hey, this feels different. This is great. Kudos to the social team. So
And ultimately, it's that choice, isn't it? Like, you, the fan, you choose. Exactly what Ed was saying. That example had two differentiated streams, but ultimately it's infinite choice and infinite content, and therefore put the power in the hands of the fan, ultimately, I think, and let them even make it selectable, let them choose the way they want to consume it. And then you cover everyone. You don't even have to segment by generic large fan profiles if there's the functionality to be able to do it all.
It's interesting that if you think about the high scale media companies out, they're all it's all consolidating. It's all going back, very few owning it. But if you think about where content started to cut through, it's lots of niche distributors who have their own audiences, who the fans have real affinity with. And I've spoken to Mark about this. Just come back to him, and he said it's about community. I talked to them, and as much as there might be 100,000, 200,000 people on that live stream with me, it feels like we're having a conversation. He said, and that's all I do. I just talk to people.
What I find interesting to pick up on is the notion of the social team, because we, in high-end broadcasts, let's say in the big broadcasters, obviously they want things to go viral. They want those things, and increasingly they want automation. They want to reduce costs. They want to, so the conversations we have are regularly about, bluntly, can I use AI to do multiple outputs? Can I have an output in 9:16, an output in 16:9, a square output? But so that as the language is changing, can we educate an assistant, let's not say AI necessarily, but an assistant to generate those things correctly? Because from a broadcast perspective, it is a different language. It's a different style of production. And I sort of have the feeling that we still need the notion of a social team, but obviously that is also something that is, an overhead, an additional cost overhead. It's something that is like, well, do we still want that? And social team almost feels a bit old-fashioned still, but in my opinion, it's still quite necessary, because it's a very different, vibes, basically. If you want it to go viral at this level, at the lower level, it's not the same as producing up here and saying, as we said about earlier, as just saying, well, if I take some clips and I just convert them this way, it's bound to go viral. You're like, I'm not sure it works like that.
But I was going to say that also, that because there's so many potential audiences that you can reach in different types of fans and locations and demographics and localization, that you may have a whole lot of opportunity out there, but you're not necessarily going to have a human staff who's going to be able to produce all those clips for all those potential fans and all those potential locations,
or even be able to conceive the strategy to do it, which is why I'd imagine, Joe, you're someone who'd be in demand in that regard, and also Ed, why you would have sort of positioned your company in the way that you have, is to basically go, look, this is too big a thing for every single individual rights holder to figure out. You don't have huge teams of people who are obsessing over this every day, and you have a lot of generalists who have to cover a lot of ground and keep a lot of people happy. So actually you need to back the right horses all the time. And those horses can change every 6 months. So actually you need people to help you and go, commit to this tech stack, commit to this strategy, and that will future-proof you, and you should be all right going forward.
Joe, I was going to say, Joe and I, we've got a podcast together as well, so we speak about this stuff a lot. But, here and now, we're speaking this stuff that's happening on a daily basis that we're chewing the fat over, that's just happened and that's just happened. And the reality is humans are actually quite slow to adopt things, but the reality is that some of the things that are going on in the background are happening on a daily basis. And it's almost trying to find the balance, because it's easy to almost get anxious in your own head about all the things that are happening. So I can only imagine what it's like if you're working within a rights holder and you just see this constant deluge of things, and I'm telling them something and Ursula's telling them something, Joe's telling them something. it's overwhelming. It totally is. And what we're trying to do is almost take all of that noise and try and give some kind of structure to it. Like I said, and then Joe and I dispute it all the time whether we're doing it properly or not.
So what are some of the we're talking about like new types of content maybe that are being created as well. You've got immersive content, possibly. You've got AR. You've got a whole bunch of stuff that you can generate before and after. Are fans kind of, in addition to wanting to see the matches and see sports presented in new and better ways, are they also looking for actually new types of digital experiences? I mean, we haven't, the ubiquitous headset hasn't quite hit yet, but there's a lot of tech out there that you can really use to produce and create really new experiences for people. Is that an opportunity, or is that an option?
We sit quite deeply in that world in terms of like live, virtual, augmented, mixed reality options and activations. And I think you're exactly right. I think you can do stuff because the tech now allows you to do it, but are those the things that people particularly want to see? Or are you trying to understand deeply how and authentically how fans want to consume content? And it might not be the really expensive, showy, flashy thing that is the thing that really cuts through. And also, as you say, not many people have the headsets. Not many people have the goggles. So actually,
but people do have the mobile phones, and there's the AR things you can do with mobile and things like that.
I wonder about that all the time. Yeah, when I see all the goggles and all that, I wonder about this because I bought one of those in the pandemic. I bought what are they called?
The Meta
Oculus?
one or the
Oculus. Thank you.
Oculus.
I bought an Oculus, and I was quite taken by it for a while, as probably a lot of people during the pandemic. But after a while, I was, like after 40 minutes of wearing this, it becomes quite uncomfortable. And then I was thinking about it, and unless you're playing a game and you're actually actively doing something with it, I was trying to imagine to watch something on it, and I tried several times, and it's just not for me for sure. But I don't know how, if you put a teenager that already has an attention span much less than I do, and already with all the, the scroll, if you put a teenager into a restricted thing like that, I don't know how much that would actually work. And I wonder when I go to the trade shows and when I go and, they're advertising these immersive experiences through the glasses, I do wonder if that's really going that way. I don't know, to be honest, but I think, like you said, I think the simplicity of being able to look something on your phone or on your pad or, scrolling is much easier and much more gratifying because you can do it anywhere. You can do it on the tube, you can do it on the bus, you can do it on the plane now. So I wonder whether it's really going to take off,
I'll put a kind of caveat or a however on it, in the sense of I think there's still quite a high cost barrier to entry, and so therefore does the experience that you're getting justify the expense of doing it and the faff? And actually, I think there'll be a point at which there'll be the technology itself to buy will get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. The content to produce, to put on it, will get easier and easier and easier. And then the experience that you have will be like, oh, well, this is totally worth it. I recently looked at the an LA Lakers game via the NBA app on the Apple Vision Pro, and it was great. It didn't make me want to buy the device, but I was like, this is really cool. The audio is very immersive. The vision is immersive. It's very uncluttered, and you look like you're there, and it feels great. And so, but it's not quite there for me. Like the value proposition isn't quite there for me yet, but I think it could get there.
I had two experiences with football on the Vision Pro, one that was good and one that was bad. What made the difference was the right camera in the right place, cut at the right time with the right replays. And what made it bad was the opposite. Like they cut to a camera that really made me jump. They put a camera in a really awkward position. And when you're immersed in the environment, when players are walking past you and you're kind of like, this is really awkward. Like, it was an awkward feeling. But it came back to the basics of TV production, which was like, if you get your cameras right, if you get your positioning, your sound right, the experience is amazing. I'm agreeing, actually. I agree that the Vision Pro experience wasn't quite there for me yet. What changed for me with the immersive experience was going to COSM in the US, one of the big bars. And then I was like, I get this now. And this is where I saw it. This is where I saw it. I had a bit of a revelation. I was like, it's just a sports bar. And obviously sports bars are huge in the US, but it's like a sports bar plus plus. It's €100, $100 a ticket to go and sit there. And there's all the rules about the stadium's literally, half a mile away, and they're not allowed to broadcast. But it's like an in-stadium experience, and it's comfy, and it's warm, and you get beers and wings and things like that. But I was like, oh, now I get immersive. Like, this makes a difference.
Do you think the thing that really makes it what it is, though, is because actually it's a shared experience with other people in that space as well?
Exactly. And that's the difference, I think, is when you're at home, that is definitely not a shared experience if I'm sat next to my wife with the thing on. But to go to the bar together, and it was people who were from LA that were supporting whoever was playing. I can't remember, Dallas versus someone. And it's like, well, they're not going to get to be able to fly to Dallas to see the I can't remember the name of the team, but they're not going to get to fly there to see them play, but they can go to the bar and feel like they're in the stadium. It's loud. But then also, when the play stops, which happens a lot in football, the DJ comes up, there's a competition, you can win a prize, you can buy a drink. It's like, oh, this is awesome. I really get this now.
I was just saying, at the end of the day, we're going back to the movies,
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, it comes back to that shared experience that when as I said, my lens will always kind of be the younger demographic. So when you look at them when they're on Roblox, you go into Roblox and last year they played 500 million hours of sports games on Roblox. It's because it's communal. They all hop into a game together. You get a notification of the games that your friends are in. So they see that they're in a hockey game or they're in a volleyball game, and they all go in together, and it's shared experience. Again, even though it's a virtual world, it's still inherently social. And I still think that that immersive moniker can mean a great many things, but actually it works best when it's immersive, but you can do it with other people. And I think that is the blocker for me. We also have an Oculus, and I find it the same. There's some really great experiences on the Oculus. You can go and visit the space station or the Mariana Trench, but actually it's a very solo thing, and it puts quite a lot of distance between you. You feel isolated when you're doing it, and particularly where young people are concerned, then, they love just being with their friends in a game and doing this on their headsets, doing challenges together. That's the very notion of social immersive for me.
So what about that live, the ultimate social experience, I guess, is that live game, when you're all physically there in the stadium. How can that be, does that need to be rethought, or are there opportunities to leverage that in better ways? I know there are digital experiences that go along with visiting a stadium, and, that can start before you're at the stadium and while you're at the stadium and then on your way home. What are some of the ways to really rethink how to do that live experience, or to enhance the live experience that's already there?
My experience in the US for a number of years is the way the US handles the in-stadium experience is up there, and the rest of the world lags behind quite a lot in my genuine experience. We've built systems specifically for stadiums in the US because the way that they go all in on the production values, and again, it's linked to the sports. It's linked to the fact there's downtime between innings, and less so in football, for example, than there is in NFL. But they go all in, and the fan experience is a very strong experience, from the ticker boards, the advertising, the digital signage, all the way through to what gets displayed on the video display boards. It's next level. And that's where you start to see it. Like Real Madrid have done it with the new Bernabeu Stadium. And, the value of the in-stadium experience in Europe, I see increasing. I don't see it being anywhere near the US yet. And I also, the one that sticks with me at the moment, have you seen the Savannah Bananas? They're fantastic.
Here she is.
They're absolutely fantastic.
Massive
and it's about,
fan, Alex. If I'd have known you were a fan, I'd have gone and put my T-shirt on, which was my Christmas present.
I think you'll know them. They're fantastic, and they're fan first. All of the reach out through the YouTube channels and like all the digital engagement is fantastic. But it is about getting fans into the stadium and having a good time in the stadium, and playing the music and doing the dances. And it's a real proper sports entertainment. And that's something that I look up to and go, okay, yes, it's sports entertainment, but is such a good experience. It's about the in-stadium experience as much as it's about the downstream digital experience as well.
With the Savannah Bananas is it's one ticket price for a family, and when you're in there, the kids, all the food and drink is free. I mean, hello? Can you imagine that happening over here?
That's what I've been. I mean, I grew up in the States, so when I came back to Europe, it was kind of like, you know, because you go to in high school, you go to the game and you go to the game 3 hours before, but you hang out in the parking lot. And it's all about, you know, the game actually doesn't really matter. It's all about everything that goes around with it, you know. And when Europeans go and see an American football match, it's like, who cares about the actual football? It's about everything else that goes around it, you know. So, actually, we're creating, or I've just created a new company, with my partner precisely to do that, and because we're looking at the fact that, you know, going to a 2 or 3 or 4 hour tennis match, youngsters don't do anymore. And we're thinking of different ideas on how to do that, how to take a sport, still keep the sport element, but add music, add immersive experience with technology, adding in, you know, MCs, adding on any kind of other entertainment, and really making it a show, so that you're catering not only to the 6-year-old, but also to the 60-year-old, and perhaps also the grandmother or whoever else wants to come along, and also make the feeling of the actual event shorter. Because again, I don't think people have the time or the patience or the money to go and pay for these large scale events anymore. And the American model just is the way to go, really. So
what I would add to that, that we've had in the UK over the last 3-4 years is the 100 in cricket. Now that is a different experience compared to probably every other sport that we have, certainly in the UK. And I must admit, when I first saw it, I was typical middle-aged, quite skeptical. Oh, it's just a lot of neon colours and things like that. And the reality is I went with my wife walked past the TV one day when I was watching it and said, "Oh, what's this? This is different." I went, "No, it's just cricket. It's just a different format." She went, "No, this looks different." And we went to a whole day. We went to watch the women's game, we went to watch the men's game, because I wanted her to see the difference between the games as well. That wasn't necessarily about, they're just playing a different kind of way. It's the different games. They were there the whole day. They loved the fact they had DJs and food and experiential. And it felt like a shared experience. And the game was important, but actually it was just important to see the DJ and everything else that was going on too. So it's the one sport where you've got to doff your cap to the ECB that they've managed to do something I'm not sure any other sport has done in the UK.
I think, Ed, that I had the exact same experience with my son. We had the best day out. It was reasonably priced. There were so many activations around that we wanted to do all of them. And actually, I just think in general, the 100, I think it got a bad rap to begin with, sort of how it was sort of initially sort of set up. But I think it's one of the biggest success stories of creating IP and creating value out of thin air. Like, you know, I just think that's a massive success. And I was going to say, Alex, when you were talking about the US, I was biting my tongue and just trying to think of a way to say it. But there's a large tournament in the US this summer. There's a big part of what we do, which is stadium entertainment. And I think it's enhancement now. Like, it's like we know the infrastructure's there in American stadiums, certainly in the Bernabeu and places like that. But it's now like, how can we take that just another level higher and just make it something where a fan goes in and goes, "Oh my gosh, that was phenomenal."
Yeah.
The way the stadiums, the stadiums have a lifespan of sort of almost 10 years, and not much more than that before they're kind of recycled and upgraded and either wholesale, moved from LA to Las Vegas or whatever, or just upgraded. So the technology even in them doesn't last very long before the life cycle upgrades. And that is obviously then they're all one-upping each other, and that's kind of a really competitive in a positive way. It helps us as a technology vendor, because the technology, every stadium wants to beat the next one to be the next Super Bowl holder or whatever. And we don't really see that in Europe. It's quite rare. Spurs build a new stadium and they build it for a specific reason, and again, actually they've leveled up. But they're not going to move that stadium in 10 years' time for absolute certain. So that will remain there for perhaps 20, 30 years before it evolves significantly. So I think those shorter lifespans And those reduced technology cycles help the progress of the one-upmanship, if you like, in the sports environment in the US.
I don't know if
So
have you guys seen the in the bird's nest they did a few weeks ago. I think it was in November. They did an esports the League of Kings, I think it's
League of
called.
Legends?
No, League of Kings.
Sorry.
It's a Chinese and they had the bird's nest. They had 65,000 people in there, and the actual gaming was there, but the show around it was absolutely mind blowing. Like, it was crazy. So yeah,
My
China's
my
also there.
first experience of esports was in 2022 or 23 or something, and they said it's nothing like traditional sports. It's totally different. I was like, oh, okay. And we went to Cologne to the Call of Duty or whatever it was. I forget the game. And I turned up, and there were vendors outside selling shirts and flags and things like that. And I got in there, and everyone was sat down looking at the event, wearing their shirts and their scarves and their banners. And then the lights went down, and they started competing, and everyone cheered. I was like, this is exactly the same as normal sports. Like, everyone's buying the shirts, So I didn't see esports. I was like, this isn't that different, to be honest. It was,
Yeah. Well,
it
have
was
a
the
look at
same.
it. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube, but it's really mind blowing if you see the final of
The sort of the big kind of live and big, immersive AR stuff around a
Crazy.
lot of esports shows.
Crazy.
So what about like at these, and we're kind of talking about, what some of the sort of big leagues and big sports could do. What about, if I'm a tier 2 or tier 3 sport or a smaller club, or a small federation that may have, maybe I've got a following in my country, or maybe, a global following that's very niche. How can I be thinking about increasing fan engagement, leveraging maybe the limited number of fans I have, because I'm probably not going to have the resources that a major league is going to have, but maybe, with an e-sport, if it's ultimate frisbee, there's enough people around the globe that I should be able to do something with that.
What I certainly see in my research into fandom amongst young people, given that they have access to 110 million YouTube channels, is that if you have a niche or a niche fandom, the likelihood is you will find a creator that satisfies that fandom. Whether you're into crochet or chess or canal boats, there'll be a creator that speaks to you. That, for me, is the opportunity for those smaller clubs and niche sports, given that also goes hand in hand with this fan behavior now that we see amongst young people. You think about it, decades ago, fandom was usually passed down through families, and it was geographically constrained. You followed your local team because that was the only one really you were ever going to go and watch. And now young people have got access to all the world's content. So you've got a 15-year-old in Birmingham who's choosing an NBA team and not necessarily deciding that they're going to be a fan of their local football club. That, I think, is the opportunity for niche sports and second-tier leagues that are resource constrained. But if you think about your addressable market as all the world's fans, and potentially all the world's 10-year-olds who are still deciding which sport they like and which tribe they're going to align themselves to, that becomes actually really exciting, because it doesn't matter how small your resources. If you can create your content and you can tap into that niche, then potentially you've got a global fan base. And I mean, it's interesting. A friend of ours, or a friend of my husband's, who coaches boys football in Manchester, and he's been doing it for a long time. And he said, when I very first started, everybody turned up to football training and they were either in a Man City kit or they were in a Man United kit. And now they're in Paris Saint-Germain, they're in Besiktas. They've chosen their teams driven by so many more factors than just your dad or your mum and dad supported a team or it was your local one. But I think that really offers an opportunity for those niche sports and those smaller clubs and leagues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what we were saying before, Joe. This the first question. That's the World Games are really niche sports. We had 34 of them last summer. and some of them have an amazing following, and some of them are super, you know, particular fans that are just following those sports. But it's amazing, you know, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to create this platform, is that if you go and you're diehard lacrosse fan and you want to see your friend competing, and then you can go in and say, oh, wow, there's also flag football, and there's also fistball, and there's, you know, flying disc, and all these different sports. So I think right now, with all this globalization that is going on, like you say, with YouTube, you can really create new fans. And, you know, if somebody starts looking and going, wow, what is this sport? You know, they're throwing a disc around. And so I think it's a great opportunity for the niche sports, because maybe the bigger sports are getting a little too big or too boring, or you know, too unreachable. And also, in my opinion, and maybe I'm being a little too harsh, or I've been around sports too long, but I think that a lot of these players are becoming too unreachable for some of the fans. You know, in the younger generation, I think they want connection. You know, they want to be able to create this community and feel like they're part of a community. So for a young kid to feel like he has a connection with a Ronaldo might be more difficult than with a club, you know, player from next door, or somebody that, I don't know. So I think niche sports might even have a bigger chance now than ever, because they're more reachable.
I think there's like second, third, fourth tier. However, let's not tier anyone, and we don't want to embarrass anyone. But they've got an unbelievable ability to be first mover when it comes to creative partnerships. And when I think about creators, I'm not just thinking about people who've never played the game or just fans. Fans are very important in that, but players who were the greatest player this sport ever had have followings thereafter too, and want to maintain their connectivity to the sport. Ultimately, that end up being a distribution point for you to still to connect with the fans and distribute your content. That doesn't stop you as a second, third, fourth tier still doing deals with media companies for distribution, but the likely is you're going to do them non-exclusively. So you can go and reach that demographic of people. They're probably going to be the older end, right? But then you can go and reach another demographic here and another demographic here. And part of that is media companies. Part of that is ex-players, athletes who become creators. Part of that is fans who become creators. Giving them access in the sport, giving them, if you feel like you can trust them, give them access to all areas, let them go into places where other people wouldn't go to go and learn about the sport in a way that, I used to say this when I worked in football a long, long time ago. It was unbelievable for me to be able to work for the club that I supported. And I used to pinch myself every day that I could just go and wander down the tunnel or go and sit pitch side to have my sandwich at lunchtime. Fans don't get to do that. So when you actually allow them to have that kind of access, they open you up then to their network.
Mm.
I think that's the key, is playing to your strengths. Like when I think about the more niche sports that we work with, it's like a strength would be the availability, as you've just said, Ed. And you can be there for your fans in a way that some of the larger organizations would struggle to be, but also go to where they are as well. Like if your fan base is this geographically, let's say if your fan base is in a certain location, run an event there, because no one else is going to be there. So, or not many others will be there. So actually go there and service those fans and make them delighted with you as a governing body, or with you as a sport, or with you as a club, or whoever it might be.
I was going to add, sorry to add to that as well. Sorry. So, and people always think about I guess it's obvious to always think towards football and that, oh yeah, but fans can be toxic and it's scary. And most other sports are not like that. Like most other sports are desperate for that connectivity with their fans. And most of the fans are just desperate to be connected to their sport. And what you find, as I've delved into other sports too, how knowledgeable fans are for those sports that they love when you get away from the big ones.
I'm still really fascinated by the power of the algorithm, though, to increase the discoverability of those sports. And I'm sure there's sports out there that I would love to watch in small chunks. You know, again, I'm not going to sit for hours at the weekend and watch them, but I would love to see the highlights of. And I'm fascinated by how I find them. So SailGP is the one for me where I would never have watched it, I don't think, and I don't recall ever searching for it. But now it's on my feed and I love it. And now I start to get, because of the adjacency, I start to get like powerboat racing or something like that. And I'm like, I would never like this before, but actually if it's there for 15, 30 seconds, maybe 1 minute, I'll watch it and I'll consume it. And I'm sure that by by consuming it, I'm helping that league in some way. Now they're not niche sports; they cost a lot of money, but still, you get the point. Like I would never have been exposed to that, and I think there's something in those sports putting the effort into understanding how discoverability works and how algorithms work, so that they can work out if we can be adjacent, if powerboat racing could be adjacent to SailGP and SailGP's got good coverage. How do we? There's all of those kind of things that there's probably not enough effort, not effort because it's about time and people, but there's probably not enough work done by those sports to understand the technology, if you like, and dig into how can we be discovered accidentally by a whole new bunch of fans. I mean, it's something that I would love to understand more myself, and I'm learning increasingly more. I just love how things come to me and I go, how did this, how have I found this? I love it.
I think there's an interesting case study from my old world of kids media that plays to that, Alex. There's a very, very successful company that runs creator channels called Pocket Watch, and they pioneered that. They had a whole suite of creator channels, some kids channels. Do you remember Ryan's World? He used to take toys out of boxes. They run Ryan's World. They would look at where traffic was coming into the channel and where it was going out. You can find that out on YouTube. What types of content were they watching before and what types of content were they watching after? And they would literally go fishing in those other pools and then tweak their content accordingly. Sport could absolutely do that. You're a volleyball rights holder. You've got a volleyball channel. Where are they coming in from? Do they like other creators or other sports? What sports is it? What they happen to be like? They like chess. Okay, so now we've got some kind of content that we could go and collaborate with a chess player. I mean, we often in sports media we're kind of talking about data all the time, and very often that data it's either player biometric data. I've been reading all the controversy around Whoop this week, or the data is then it's like, how can we just turn that into gambling revenue? But there's so much more data that actually is media consumption and behavioral data that actually could help iterate and improve the kinds of content that we make, that I don't think is to your point, I don't think is leveraged enough, actually.
So I was going to say, rather than banning Whoop, let's say to the athletes, actually give us the data, because some great storytelling we can tell there. Now, they won't want to do that, but if they did, what that data is going to tell you is stuff that you don't see in the normal statistics that are being generated. Because when you start going down to that level of heart rate and all those kind of things, you start to understand physiologically about the players, what they're going through in the game that you don't see in any other statistic.
Have a look at PTO. Have a look at PTO's coverage.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah. So it tells a story. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's kind of what we're talking about, is that it's not just we're all going out to the stadium and we're going to watch a sport, and if you want, you can do some video of that sport and broadcast it. That's now that there's an opportunity for so many different types of content that just happen to be about that happen to have a competitive theme, and that there's so many different ways into this content, for so many different people. I think it's, there's the whole revolution that we're looking at that's kind of divorced from the, not just the play on the field, but the storytelling and all the other content that can be spun off of that, which is amazing. We're going to have to wrap up. We feel like we've just scratched the fan surface. But thank you so much, guys. It was great to hear you. And I hope, maybe we can continue this conversation again in the future. Thank you so much.